Reading tonight from Genesis chapter 50, verses 18. Then his brothers also knew and fell down before his face. And they said, Behold, we are your servants. Joseph said to them, Do not be afraid, for am I in the place of God. But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive.
If you want to be following along with us this evening, we're going to be looking at the story of Joseph. So we're starting in Genesis 37, and we'll make it all the way to Genesis chapter 50 tonight. But intentions are a funny thing. There's a lot of times that we have good intentions and they simply don't work out. Sometimes bad intentions, it seems like, turn out for good, and we just always can't figure out how intentions are going to go. I always tell my own children and the kids in the youth group, and we have to be careful. We judge others by their actions, but ourselves on our intentions. We're very quick to say, this person did this to me, or slighted me in this way, or hurt me in this way. But when confronted with our own faults, and when confronted with the hurt that we may impact on others, we always counter with, I never meant to do that. I would never do that on purpose. And so we look at our own intentions, but we judge others by their actions. So intentions can certainly be a difficult thing to figure out. And the story of Joseph is one where intentions are all over this book. And then the passage that John read is the final intention and where we want to get to this evening. So we see in Genesis 37, we've got Joseph's early life. It starts out, as we all know it, the coat of many colors in Genesis 37:3. And I'm sure that it was not his father's intention that there would be jealousy or animosity amongst his brothers. He was a favorite son, Joseph was. But it made people uncomfortable. It made his brothers uncomfortable that he was shown this favor. And Joseph probably wasn't his intention to, when he was telling his brothers and his family about his dreams, that he was thinking that he was better than them, that he was saying that they were less than he was. But that's how it was taken. I don't know Joseph's mindset. I can't possibly speak to that. And maybe it is a possibility. Maybe Joseph's intention was to irritate his brothers. I know having kids that, they find new ways to irritate each other each and every day. Creative ways that you never knew were possible. They can find things just to pick at each other and just to be annoying. So maybe Joseph was that younger brother that was telling them about how great he was in these dreams. Coupled with his coat of many colors, and maybe it made his brothers a little irritated, maybe a little frustrated. But we know that his life started out this way. Things were good for Joseph. But then things began to take a turn. His brothers have this jealousy and this hatred. We see it in Genesis 37, beginning in verse 19. Then they said to one another, Look, this dreamer is coming. Come therefore, let us now kill him and cast him into some pit, and we shall say, Some wild beast has devoured him. We shall see what becomes of his dreams. All right, this one, there's no gray area. These are some bad intentions. These brothers are angry. They're jealous. They have this hatred. Regardless of what has happened before, regardless of the intentions before, it's now taken a turn. It's now become very, very serious. And they have this hatred for him, and it begins to shape their intentions. You see their intentions manifesting themselves, talking about killing him. And what a despicable thing that is. But now look, and we see Reuben speak up, and Reuben's intentions become clear. Genesis 37 and 21 and 22, and then we'll skip to 29 and 30. But Reuben heard it, and he delivered them out of their hands, and said, "Let us not kill him." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit, which is in the wilderness, and do not lay a hand on him, that he might deliver him out of their hands and bring him back to his father." So Reuben is level-headed. He's the one that's saying, wait a minute, this is crazy. We're not going to do this. What are you thinking? We're not going to kill our brother. So he says, don't do that. Put him in this pit and we'll figure it out later. Not the best intentions, certainly, but better than his other brothers. But when he returns, in verse 29, then Reuben returned to the pit, and indeed Joseph was not in the pit. And he tore his clothes, and he returned to his brothers and said, "The lad is no more, and where shall I go?" Reuben again realizes what his brothers have done. His thought was, put him in the pit. Let's give him a little scare. Let's just kind of mess with him. We're not going to kill him. But then Reuben goes away, and then when he returns, they've already done this thing. They've already sold him into slavery. Reuben never intended it for this to go this far. I don't know about you, but I many times in life have had that regret. Usually in my youth, it was usually something where immediately you would do something and immediately you saw the consequence. I can remember one time my brother, I had a loft bedroom, and he was bothering me and throwing a ball at the wall of the loft I was in trying to do my homework because I was a scholarly young man. And I was so irritated with him. And I took the ball, and being not an athlete but a scholar, let it go. And as soon as I let it go, I was like, that was a bad choice. And one shattered light later, I realized the bad choice that I had made. But that is the worst feeling when you do something, when you let go of that ball and you go, I shouldn't have done that, but you now have nothing to do. So as the glass is falling and I hear my mom charging in, my brother escaping punishment yet again because I have now broken this light, I realized regret and realized that I was just mad and I just wanted him to leave me alone, but I didn't handle it the right way. So I can imagine with Reuben just immediately having that regret, like, what are you guys doing? What have we done? So Reuben's intentions here are in the right place. Joseph is sold into slavery, and we know how things go. We know he goes down to Egypt. And we look in Genesis chapter 39. Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites, who had taken him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man. He was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and the Lord made all he did prosper in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight and served him. And he made him overseer of his house and all that he put under his authority. So it was from that time that he made him overseer of his house and all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and the field. Joseph's intentions never waver. I'm always amazed at this story. And here's Joseph, and he's sold into slavery. And I'm sure he was bitter. I'm sure he was angry. I'm sure he was hurt. But his focus never leaves God. We can see in these verses that his intention was to serve the Lord. His intention was to do what God would call him to do. And he wouldn't waver from that. He would continue on in that. And because of that intention that turned into action, turns into a blessing for Potiphar's house. Potiphar is blessed by Joseph's intentions and actions. But then again, we see other intentions come into play. Potiphar's wife's intentions are anything but good. Verse 7 of chapter 39, it came to pass that after these things, that his master's wife cast longing eyes on Joseph. And she said, lie with me. But he refused. And he said to his master's wife, look, my master does not know what is with me in the house, and he has committed all that he has to my hand. There is no one greater in the house than I, nor has he kept anything back from me but you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? Joseph, again, his intentions continue to be on God, and his actions follow. So it was as she spoke to Joseph this day by day, but he did not heed her to lie with her or to be with her. But it happened about this time when Joseph went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house were inside, that she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand and fled and ran outside. So Joseph continues on these intentions, continues with his character, continues with his actions. Potiphar's wife's intentions were not so pure. They were evil. They were against what God would want done, but Joseph would have nothing to do with it. And so Joseph flees. Potiphar's wife continues with her bad intentions and continues on in this, and there Joseph winds up in prison. And Joseph winds up with this crime that he did not commit. And again, his actions continue to glorify God. You can see in verse 21 through 23. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy. He gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever they did there, it was his doing. The keeper of the prison did not look into anything that was under Joseph's authority, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. Joseph is just an example after an example of continuing to do God's work, continuing to seek God's will, even though situations continue to mount against him. I know at this point, after being sold into slavery and then winding up in prison for something I didn't do, that I'm going to be honest, my attitude would not be what Joseph's is. That I would have a little resentment towards God, that I would be frustrated, that I would at least be questioning what was happening. Why do my good intentions continue to bring about bad results? But Joseph's not that way. And he continues to do what the things that God calls him to do, and God continues to bless him. And then we have the cupbearer comes to him, and we have the baker, and they come to him and they talk to him about their dreams. And through God's blessing, through God's gift, Joseph is able to interpret these dreams. Chapter 40, verses 21 through 23. Then he restored, this is Pharaoh, the chief butler, to his butlership again, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, as Joseph has interpreted to them. Yet the chief butler did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. That's got to be frustrating. That's got to be sort of disappointing. I can't believe that Joseph didn't ask him, hey, tell Pharaoh about me. Remember me. But this cupbearer, this chief butler, as he's sometimes called, doesn't remember. We don't know his intentions. I'm sure, I would guess that he was thankful that Joseph had interpreted his dream, and he was thankful that he lived, but he doesn't remember him. I'm sure he had the best intentions. Oh, I'll tell him. I'm going to tell him. I'll let him know about you. But he doesn't. And so things continue on. Joseph stays in prison. So then we see Joseph's rise to power. We know these things. It's funny when I sometimes study these stories, I always sometimes think about our VBS skits and what we have done in the past and these things that we've done. And so I remember doing this story not that long ago. And I remember that Pharaoh has these dreams. Joseph's able to interpret them. No one else is. Because God's blessing them. God's got a plan through all of this. Genesis 41, we see the interpretation of dreams, or we see Pharaoh's dreams, and no one can interpret. And then in Genesis 42, Joseph again shows his character, shows his intentions. Joseph knew what these dreams were, and then his rise to power. Pharaoh saw that Joseph had these abilities, these gifts to interpret dreams. And because of this, he's placed in this place of power. Joseph had great intentions for the famine, the coming famine. He knew what was coming. And because of it, he made plans accordingly. But then things take a little bit of a change, because Joseph's brothers have entered the picture again. And Joseph has been through so much. He's been the little brother that was thrown in a pit, scared and afraid. What are my brothers going to do? He's been sold into slavery. He's been in Potiphar's house, and he did good. He did what God intended him to do, and he was rewarded. But then Potiphar's wife came along. He did what God intended him to do, and then he still winds up in prison. And then he stays, and he does well, and he's blessed by God, and he interprets these dreams, but he remains in prison. Finally, things are looking up for Joseph. And when his brothers arrive, they don't recognize him. Let's pick up in verse 7 and 8. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he acted as a stranger to them and spoke roughly to them. Then he said to them, "Where do you come from?" And they said, "From the land of Canaan to buy food." So Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. I wonder how it felt there just for a minute when he realizes, I know these guys. I recognize them. Joseph is now in the second highest official in all of Egypt, and he's got this, I'm sure he looks like an Egyptian. He doesn't look like the Hebrew that he was. He's taken on their demeanor. He's aged quite a bit. He's a different man than they knew. So he speaks roughly to them. He speaks harshly to them. He's going to get his little bit of revenge. This is the point where Joseph's intentions start to waver. He's done it all so well at this point. He's done so much good, but man, his brothers are back, and he has an opportunity. He's got that frustration that's been building up and building up. Verses 14 through 16. But Joseph said to them, "It is as I spoke to you, saying, you are spies. In this manner you shall be tested by the life of Pharaoh. You shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you and let him bring your brother, and you shall be kept in prison, that your words may be tested to see whether there is any truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies." So he finds out about Benjamin, that he has a younger brother by the same mother, and he says, "Bring him here. Bring him to me so that I know that you're not spies, so that I know that you're telling the truth." And so they bring back Benjamin. Joseph still has got these intentions, and they're still questionable. Again, for me, maybe you can. I can't blame him at this point. Because to me, it's a couple of chapters in the Bible, but to Joseph, it's his lifetime. Day after day after day of frustration after frustration. After good intention after good intention coming up empty. I don't blame them. Verse 2 of chapter 44, and so he sets a trap. Also, put my cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest, and his grain money. So he did according to the word, just as Joseph had spoken. So he sets his trap. Places this silver cup in Benjamin's bags, sends them on their way. And then he calls back for them, so that they can capture all of them and bring them back. And I can imagine just everybody's heart sinking when they find this silver cup. It had to be a little bit of poetic justice for them to know what it feels like to be accused of something you didn't do. And then Judah speaks up in verse 33 of chapter 44. Now therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the lad as a slave to my Lord. Let the lad go be with his brothers. Judah's intentions change. Verse 26 and 27. So Judah said to his brothers, what profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? This is going back. It's almost like a flashback of this moment when Joseph is in the pit. Judah said to his brothers, what profit is there if we kill our brothers and conceal his blood? Let us sell him to the Ishmaelites. Let not our hand be upon him. And his brothers listened. So Reuben's intentions were to protect Joseph. Judah's intentions were to sell him. Again, not the best intentions, but better still than killing him. And now at this point, Judah gets his redemption. He is able to say, not Benjamin, not this brother. Because he knows the pain that it gave to their father Jacob. Don't take this brother. Judah, I imagine, as had Reuben, as had many, all his brothers, carried that guilt around for all those years. Had kept that secret for all those years. That every time they saw their father weeping about the loss of his son, or every time he thought longingly about Joseph, that they knew just that guilt and that pain hung on their hearts. And so we see Judah get this opportunity for redemption and say, no, not this brother. And then we see the best part. The best part is not our intentions. Because as we said in the beginning, sometimes we have great intentions, but they fall short. Sometimes we have great intentions and they just go bad. Sometimes we have bad intentions and then regrets. But God's intentions are always pure. So Joseph is able to, with his brothers, reconcile, and then he reveals himself to them and says, it's me, here's your brother, and they are reconciled, and they're able to be together. They're able to be a family once again. And his brothers are anxious, they're nervous. And they begin to question about themselves, is he really okay with this? Is he really angry? And Joseph gets back into God's intentions, and this is the verse that I love. Verse 20 of chapter 50. But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring about as to this day to save many people. So it's such an amazing thing that Joseph now gets it. And to me, this is one of my favorite things in the Bible, that Joseph is able to say, you intended it for evil, God intended it for good. God's intentions for Joseph unfortunately meant that Joseph had to go through what he had to go through. God, knowing his heart, knowing the person that Joseph is, trusts Joseph to accomplish his goals. And man, it was a tough road for Joseph. But it wasn't just about Joseph. In the end, Joseph here is the second highest official in all of Egypt. He's taken on a wife and has his own family and all these things. All of this has come together for the good of Joseph. It was a long road, it was a tough road, but it came together for Joseph. It came together for God's people. There's a famine in the land. And maybe God's people wouldn't survive. Maybe the Israelites wouldn't have made it through it. Certainly, if Joseph had not been in Egypt to make this plan, to store this grain, to set aside so that they could eat, a lot of people would have died, including maybe God's chosen people of Israel. Jacob's family maybe would have been wiped out. And so Joseph, at this point, knows, hey, I've saved my family. On top of that, I've saved a number of Egyptians. I've done a good thing. And Joseph says, you intended it for evil, God intended it for good. But God, in his infinite wisdom, is even looking so much forward past Joseph. He knew that he had made the promise to Abraham that he would be the father of his chosen people, but he knew also through the line of David that Christ would come. So God is protecting his plan. God's intentions are already in place at the time of Joseph, and he knows these people, the people of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they have to survive. Because I'm going to send someone for all of us, for all the world. Salvation for every single one of us. And God said, I need Joseph to be here so that it can happen. God's intentions were always for his people. Joseph's brothers may have thought, this is, we're going to get him, we're going to sell him into slavery. And God said, that's what has to happen. Everything lined up perfectly. God intended it for good. Sometimes in life, I haven't even experienced a fraction of the difficulties that Joseph did. But for me, I sometimes have to just sit back and go, okay, what are God's intentions here? I can't see anything good coming out of this. But again, we don't know the whole story yet. Sometimes God's intentions are just shaping us. They're just moving pieces into the right place so that the puzzle can be completed. God's intentions that day was for the people to be saved and for Christ to come. God's intentions for us now is to follow him, to make that decision, to become followers of him. I love the way that Josh said it, and I'm probably paraphrasing this morning. I thought it was so good, but the invitation is always open. We just give you an opportunity to respond to it. So in just a minute, we'll sing a song, and that's your opportunity to respond. Not to this lesson, not to me, but to God, to Christ, to the calling of becoming a child of His. Maybe it's a response to come home, to be reunited with God. Maybe you just need the prayers of the church. Whatever you need, we offer an invitation now as we stand and sing.